show of hands, who here has heard of Reddit? One? Oh, okay. Well, anyway, I'm super excited to be here to introduce you to my friend Nick Caldwell. I met Nick for the first time when I was CTO at Reddit, and we were doing a VP of Eng search. And we had been doing it for 9 months, I think, and we had maybe talked to 12 or 18 very good people, but nobody quite met. We had a really kind of aggressive set of criteria that we were looking for, and we could kind of take our time. Something about the criteria, we needed somebody who had a track record of building large teams quickly, somebody who cares about and knows how to build awesome cultures, somebody who cares about building a diverse and inclusive culture, somebody who cares about improving the world. That's something very important to us. Somebody who wants to win, and somebody who doesn't mind solving lots of hard problems. And I don't mean just tech problems, I mean various interesting corporate culture management problems that we also have to tackle. And even most important, somebody who has better taste in clothes than I do, which actually was all the candidates, so whatever, fine. So after interviewing a bunch of people, I chatted with Nick on the phone. He was up in Seattle, and after about an hour, I turned to Steve and I said, that's the guy. Steve's our CEO. And so we went into sale mode. I told Nick I would do anything. I'd paint his fence. I would mow his lawn. That offer still stands. I think I still owe it to him. And then he joined us as VP of Eng, and his impact was immediate. He started really smoothing out everything that we do, making everything run really well. How we plan, how we execute, how we hire, everything. And then that was extremely important because we're rapidly growing, and we continue to rapidly grow. In fact, in the last 18 months, I think Reddit engineering grew by about 3x, which is a lot to take on. And if it follows normal operating procedure of a Silicon Valley company, it will grow 3x again in the next 18 months. So a lot going on. Before coming to join us at Reddit, he was at Microsoft for 15 years as a general manager, which meant that he has giant teams and has to make them work really, really well. And right now, he actively participates with DevColor, which is a nonprofit that works to maximize the impact of black software engineers. And he's also a founder of Color Code, which is a scholarship that's dedicated to future leaders of color in tech. So please help me welcome Nick to the stage. He's going to be talking about growing teams by 3x.
I'm Nick Caldwell. Thank you guys for joining me here at QCon Day 3. I'll be your keynote speaker, and I want to do a quick reintroduction of myself, VP of Engineering at Reddit. Previously, I was a general manager at Microsoft. There's some Power BI folks in the audience here today. Really glad to see you guys. Before that, schooled at MIT. Go Bears for a cow. Any Bears in the audience? There we go. Go Bears. I want to talk to the few of you who don't know about what Reddit is. This is going to lead into explaining some of the challenges that I face. So what is Reddit? Reddit is the front page of the internet, a social network where there are tens of thousands of communities around whatever passions or interests that you might have. The way that we think about Reddit is exactly that, a collection of passionate communities. And one of the interesting things about that is it means that Reddit has one of the highest engagement scores of any site on the web. So here's Alexa, top 10 list. We've got Google, YouTube, Facebook, and Reddit. And if you check out that column, daily time on site, 15 minutes and 50 seconds. Next closest is Facebook with 9 minutes and 50 seconds. So I want to explain why that works, how that works. Reddit is unique in the following ways. Reddit has pseudo-anonymous accounts. You don't have to sign in with your real identity. And for those of you who are asking about the future of Reddit, it will always be that way. You will always be able to do pseudo-anonymous accounts. We have passionate communities with rules so that only certain types of content can go into a community. We have voting, and we have this thing called the hot front page, which aggregates all that great content from across the entire internet. When you apply scale to that, you get the following thing, just an endless stream of addictive, time-sucking content. We like to think of Reddit as weaponized procrastination. So that's what I'm doing for a living. Now, where are we at Reddit? Reddit is the 4th largest website in the United States, according to Alexa. 325 million monthly active users, 1.1 million communities. What's new this year? New executive team. Steve and Alexa have come back. More importantly, a new product vision. I think a lot of you who are our core Redditors might agree that the site could be more welcoming, and that is going to be a core focus. That was a core focus for us last year. Now we've got a foundation to build on it toward the future. And then rapid hiring, and that's what this presentation is going to be about. Last year, we grew Reddit from 40 engineers. We currently have 130, plus about 25 part-time contractors. And I expect that that's going to continue through next year. So why do I want to talk about scale? Why is this presentation important to me, and why I hope you guys care about it? A few years ago, there was a report, the Startup Genome Report, and they surveyed about 1,000 startups, ones that had been successful, ones that had failed, and tried to ask them why and figure out the formula for a successful startup. And this was an interesting statistic. Within 3 years, 92% of startups fail. Of those, 43% fail due to issues with scale. And this is a really important statistic for me because I've just traded my cushy executive level position at Microsoft to come join Reddit. And I would love for us to be successful. So with that in mind, here's my first week at Reddit. Marty introduced me to, in the first week, to a 30-person stand-up. All right. I think the way to characterize what we saw here was that Reddit was still kind of using the tools and techniques of a very, very small team, but trying to scale up with them. So we saw that 30-person stand-up. We saw Google Slides tracking our work. So we hadn't fully implemented JIRA yet. We had a lot of people running around calling themselves tech leads, but there was really no org chart, no like really formal management structure, and there was a lot of resistance to that as well. And then we had a really slow delivery pace. There wasn't a lot of things coming out of the engineering organization. And with all that in mind, tons of stuff to do, tons of stuff to ship. I don't think anyone looks at Reddit and imagines that it's done. And we also needed to hire about 100 people. So with Marty's help and the rest of the exec team, we managed to fix all these problems. And this is what the presentation is going to be about. I'll tell you about my experience and the rest of the exec team's experience at Reddit. First thing we had to fix, roles and responsibilities. So when you're in a really, really small company, I think your classic example for any Silicon Valley startup is you've got your technical co-founder and your product co-founder. And those two work together to effectively do everything imaginable. I think the best example of this is like you might have your CTO on sales calls if you're at a really, really, really small company. But as you scale up, you can attract expertise and you can specialize. That CTO and product co-founder split off into engineering disciplines, and product discipline, design, and then a whole other constellation of specialties. This was the first thing we had to do at Reddit, and I'll tell you a quick example of why it mattered so much. At Reddit, we encounter a lot of different legal issues. We're a really, really big site, big target. And I want to talk to you about our chief legal counsel. Her name's Missy Tidwell, and her first week at Reddit. So in Missy's first week at Reddit, she joined a meeting. It was called the Reddit Legal Counsel meeting. And in this meeting were about 15 to 20 IC-level engineers who were all very passionate about the law. All right? As if you could take 15 passionate people, cram them in a room, and immediately gain the equivalent of a Harvard law degree. This is what Missy walked into. She immediately shut that meeting down and proceeded to own legal counsel at Reddit. Now, this extends to other areas of your organization, not just law, but you've got to figure out a way to tease apart responsibilities as you scale. Now, one really common framework is this thing called RACI. And maybe you guys have seen this thing before. What you do is you make a chart of all the people in your organization, as well as all the different responsibilities they might have. And RACI stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. So you make this chart, and then you assign people R, A, C, or I, depending on their relationship to the different tasks. And the really nice thing about this is you get very, very clear ownership outcomes. Everyone knows exactly who's responsible for what after you go through this operation. And for Reddit, there were kind of two interesting things we had to tease apart. First was the relationship between product program managers, and engineering managers. We had a lot of people who were program managers, and for those of you who still have those in your organization, you know they kind of switch hit. They're doing a little bit of running daily stand-ups. They're also doing a lot of the customer interaction and so forth. We split that into two roles. Product managers who are responsible for the who, what, and why of what the product organization is producing, and then engineering managers who are responsible for how and when things are going to be built. This immediately allowed us to get people focused on the things that they were best at. Program managers converting to product managers, and engineering managers allowed to run the engineering organization. Now, the second thing with engineering managers, going back to what I said at first, we didn't really have any engineering managers at Reddit when we started. We had folks calling themselves tech leads. And tech leads is a really, really difficult title. I don't know if you guys have tech leads in your organization, but I remember when I was first starting as an engineer, I asked my manager what a tech lead was, and he said no one really knows. Kind of depends on your organization. And you know, now like 15 years later, people ask me like, what is a tech lead? And I'm like, nah, I don't really know. But I do know what engineering managers are, and I know what architects are. So I needed to come up with a formula to convert all these folks who were calling themselves tech leads into roles that had more clear functions. So I came up with the Voight-Kampff test for engineering managers. Anyone Blade Runner fans in here? Okay, so you guys know what Voight-Kampff is. You go in the machine, you take the test, and it tells you whether or not you're a human or a robot. This test will tell you whether or not you're an engineering manager or an architect. What do you care more about, people or architecture? Pretty straightforward. What are your thoughts about shipping on a deadline? If you're an engineering manager and you don't want to ship things on time, you might have a bad time of it. More interesting one, your PM goes to two of your direct ports and tells them immediately start working on a feature. What do you do? As an engineering manager, you've got to stay on top of that. And then finally, you spend one full day a week fishing LinkedIn, working with recruiting. How do you feel? All right? This very quickly split our tech leads into a class of people who cared more about building the team and process and so forth, and another class of people who cared about the code and the architecture. Now, the disadvantages of using this technique, this RACI technique, is it's inflexible. Sometimes you do have people who can switch hit. Occasionally you get like an engineer who's really good at design or has really good product intuition. And it also doesn't directly address some of the deeper issues, which is trust. All right? And you can't scale your organization ultimately without trust. So I won't go into detail on this slide, but it just talks about the advantages and disadvantages of running an organization with high trust. This comes from a book called The Speed of Trust, and I encourage you to check it out. The long story short of it is you're more efficient the more you can take dependencies that you trust. Later on, I'm going to talk about microservices and how that idea relates to microservices. But for now, just imagine that to fix this, we had to go to executive offsites with leadership training coaches. We didn't quite do trust falls, but we did find a way to put our faith in each other. And I think in general, people feel okay to say that's not my job when they can also say the person we hired to do it is amazing. And a quick tip for those of you who are scaling your organizations and you might have this problem now, when you hire people into your organization, I strongly encourage you not to put them in a position where they have to prove themselves to the organization before you give them responsibility. Because you just spent weeks interviewing them and convincing them to work for your organization, I think a better way to handle onboarding new people into your team is to trust them first, give them tasks, and then verify that they are delivering what they said they were going to deliver. So trust but verify when you're bringing new people into your organization. All right? So that's how we ended up in an organization where we had good roles and responsibilities, but we still didn't have an org chart. So org charts are pretty scary. I think the most terrifying part of constructing your organization really is deciding on the structure, who reports to who, what the responsibilities are, et cetera. So I caution you that this next section might be a little bit terrifying, but it is also one of the keys to success at Reddit. Now, I want to introduce a concept called Conway's Law. Conway is an academic. Many years ago, he wrote a paper about organizational structures, and one key insight on that was organizations which design systems are constrained to produce designs which are copies of the communication structures of these organizations. And all that really boils down to is you will ship your org chart. I think you can see this in products. Many of you, I was at Redfin the other day, and I was trying to test this on them. I said, when I look at the Redfin product, there's an area for realtors, there's an area for people who are searching for real estate, and there's an area for people who are trying to analyze data. And I bet somewhere in your org chart there's a group for each of those three people, and they said yes, of course. And I think you'll see that same pattern emerging across pretty much any company. So Conway's law has been fairly well trod. Now, the challenge then is that your organization needs to continually reflect the organization's most immediate goals, and the best people for each goal should be continually moved to where they are most needed. Now that's an ideal statement, a very ideal statement, but intuitively that should make sense. The challenge is reorgs suck. Nobody likes switching man. Raise your hand in this room if you like reorgs. You want to switch managers. Marty. Thanks, Marty. So reorgs suck. People don't like, people build strong relationships with their managers. They don't want to, they don't like change in general. And they don't like the risk and uncertainty, the feeling that the ground is moving out from under them that comes with reorgs. But actually, I should tell you a little story about that. Reddit's first reorg. So Reddit, even when I got there, there was only about 35 people, and we needed to move one of our key engineers around. Now you can guess why we needed to move someone around. Reddit had a great front-end engineer, and we needed to get him into a position where he could work on the site redesign. And in order to make this happen, in order to move one engineer from one part of the organization to another part of the organization where he was most needed, we had to get HR involved. They called his wife to get permission. And many of the PM teams who had never been involved in a reorg also submitted their opinions through back channel just to move one engineer from one part of the organization to another. So reorgs can be really painful. Just so you know, like ultimately that engineer became one of the key leaders at Reddit. He's now leading our front-end guild. Now, I will say that reorgs have the following advantage. A, they do put your resources where they're most needed, but more importantly, they allow leaders who are comfortable with change and who want most urgently to participate in the most important aspects of your business to surface. So there can be good and bad, but I think that for the efficiency of your organization and for surfacing new leaders, reorgs can be quite useful. Now with Reddit, it took us about 5 or 6 months. It took us 1 month to get to that first person moving, and about 5 months later, here's Reddit's first org chart. So I'd like to revise Conway's law in the following way. You are going to ship your org chart. You just have to make sure that you're continually shipping the right one. With Reddit, we ended up with groups of product groups around significant investments like the site redesign, doing chat. There's an initiative called Reddit Social, but vertical teams to attack specific customer problems. And then shared teams that go horizontally and are used by every part of the organization. Those would include things like your foundational infrastructure team. We have a team called Anti-Evil, which fights crime, I guess, across the entire site. And then each box in our org chart has a very clear, bounded, time-bounded mission statement. So this is what we ended up with after 5 months, and I'm pretty happy with it. But what's next? If you go back and read that original Mel Conway paper, it's got an interesting note at the end. It says, the design which occurs first is almost never the best possible. The prevailing system may need to change. Therefore, flexibility of the organization is important to an effective design, which I think is, it's subtle, but it's very important. And I think that in today's modern world, it's something everybody who is responsible for designing organizational systems needs to pay attention to. And the idea here is that you can actually reverse Conway's law. That is to say, the architecture that you're building can inform the organizational structure. And microservices and the strong push toward that, which I think which is what a lot of this conference is about, enables that scenario. Microservices fundamentally change how we think about an organization. So this is a really cool diagram. It's called the Death Star architecture. And on the left, you've got Amazon. On the right, you've got Netflix. This is their constellation of microservices that hold up Amazon and Netflix. And I think that if you end up with an organizational or an architecture of this form, that in the future, mission, value, and culture will probably end up being more important than rigid organizational hierarchy. And if you look at Amazon and Netflix and you examine how those companies exist and how they form, both of these companies have inch-thick culture decks. I don't know if you've seen the Netflix one. It is literally like a 120-page slide deck. Amazon, very similar, very, very strong about cultural values. And they also have another property. Both of these companies aspire to have very, very small teams. So Amazon is famous for its pizza box size teams. I'm sure you guys have heard that. And Netflix, similarly, they have, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but Netflix says we only hire seniors because we want people to act independently. And they also have very, very small teams. So I think that one thing that you guys should be aware about throughout the day as we talk about culture and microservices is how microservices are affecting the shape of organizations. It's something that's fascinating to me. Okay, let's move on. Other things that change as you scale, people. First photo on the top left, that is one of my first teams at Microsoft, the Power BI team when it was only 3 months old. And what you can see there is every single person in that team fits on my porch, all right? Fits on my porch. And then the next photo is that same team a year later. I can't even fit everyone in the team into the frame. And I can also tell you, unfortunately, I don't know most of the people in that photo. So the more people you have, the more disconnected you can feel from the team. How do you deal with that? Or I guess as you scale, everyone's going to have one of these moments. The elevator moment is what I like to call it. If you guys are Mad Men fans, here's Don Draper in one of his reports. Don's in the elevator. His report says, "I feel bad for you." Don says, "I don't think about you at all." Now, I'm sure your experience won't be that bad, but you are eventually going to start bumping into people who maybe even work for you that you don't recognize. And what do you do about it? Well, don't feel bad about it. There's a concept called Dunbar's number, and it's really a bit of research done about how many people you can actually know. And it turns out the answer is 150, that above 150 relationships, the human mind simply cannot maintain the connections. And Reddit, we're up to about 300 total people now, so we're well beyond Dunbar's number. But I'll claim that you don't need to know everyone at the party to have a good time. So it's safe if you're responsible for organizational design to assume that subcultures are going to form. But how do you handle it? Well, at Reddit, and I think at most companies, you can use a technique of forming technology guilds or affinity groups. These are all great ways to give people a place to call home even as the company expands. So at Reddit, we've got front-end guild, back-end guild. We've got guilds for Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, you can really pick anything you might want as long as you give people some place to connect to. They'll still have that feeling that they're at home. Don't let anyone ruin the party. So even though subcultures are going to form, you have to make sure that they're not forming in a way that goes against your core company values. And that's the final point. Make sure that your core company values are crisp and clearly understood, and that they inform all of the subcultures that may form within your organization. Reddit solution, guilds, weekly all-hands meetings where we celebrate our key cultural elements. And then one other thing that we do, which I'm not sure that will continue to scale, is we have company mega events. Take the entire company to Tahoe to talk about our successes, our failures, and our cultural values. All right? But what about communication? I think that as you scale, you still need to talk to people. You still need to disseminate information. Unfortunately, this is an unsolved human problem. You can try all of these different techniques: newsletters, team syncs, company meetings, interest groups, documentation, one-on-ones, posters, onboarding, press releases, offsite Slack, email, wikis, and dashboards. Unfortunately, none of them work. You have to use them all. I think that in my lifetime, I will see drones delivering pizza. I will see self-driving cars. I will see stem cells solve most modern ailments, but I will not see a solution to getting two groups of people 50 feet apart to speak to each other. You know I'm right. So what can you do? You do have to try all of those things. And I'll add to that, you can beat the telephone game by messaging with extreme clarity. You have to make sure that when you message, you have something in it that applies to everyone in your organization. You have to repeat, and reinforce, get your leaders to understand the core of the message and repeat it out, and over-communicate. So this is a photo of some posters that we hung up in the wall of my last team because we had quality problems and we had problems with people implementing telemetry. So anywhere you would go in our building, you saw these posters: quality and telemetry. And they became kind of our core values for the year. So extreme clarity. Now, I'm going to end this section by talking about engineering, what gets harder with scale. And this is kind of the core of what I did at Reddit to try and get them operating effectively. There's three things that change. First is awareness. Your company gets bigger. Everyone wants to know what everyone else is doing, but they don't necessarily want to say what they're doing. All right. Coordination. All right. You've got more teams with more dependencies. Not only do you need to know what everyone else is doing, but you may have to align ship schedules and things like that. And then finally, bottlenecks can hit you really, really hard. So if you've got tons and tons of dependencies in your organization and you're getting network dependencies, a failure in one part of your organization can knock out the ship schedule for multiple other teams. So this is what gets harder. I want to show you. And let me just sorry, 1 second. I think my clicker is. Why does it get harder? I think I mentioned this before. The reason I went to Berkeley was I got an MBA, so I want to pull out this $100,000 slide. So my MBA enabled me to make these efficiency curves. So one common thing is surely you can just add more people into an organization and things will get more efficient. Turns out to not be true. As you add more people into an organization, their efficiency goes down, and that's because of communication overhead or breaks in your process. Coordination costs, scope increase eventually kill your efficiency, and you need a process change or reorg in order to overcome this curve. So with that, I want to show you where we started at Reddit. This is Reddit's first project tracker. It is a Google spreadsheet, or excuse me, a Google slide. And, 1 second, this guy's acting up. It's a Google slide. You can see that we have copy and pasted JIRA links into the slide very carefully. Some of the items in the slide have green or yellow check marks, also hand edited. And most importantly, you will see that we have Aquaman and Batgirl. Very frequently, we spent more time talking about the images, Aquaman or Batgirl, than we did about the actual information on the slide. And there were 12 of these slides that we had to go through during our stand-ups. So this is where we started. Now, I needed to come in and convert that into something that would work for an organization and that we could scale with. I want to caution anyone else that finds himself in this situation to do it carefully. All right? The reason for that is you don't want to, in an organization that is not used to process, be the guy who comes and lands a ton of process on the team. They will generally not react that well. If you find yourself in this situation, I would say just avoid boilerplate solutions. If someone comes to you with here's an Agile framework book, I'm telling you, back away slowly. All right? There are some variants of Agile that promote intra-team coordination and coordination more than they promote actually shipping software. And that is a very dangerous thing to bring into your team. So I do want to talk about the original Toyota Kanban. So if you guys ever wonder where Kanban boards come from, they come from Toyota, many, many years ago. And they had a process called Kaizen. I think for me, it's the most important inspiration for how I build engineering teams. And the idea was really, really simple. If you were in a Toyota factory working on the production line, there was this thing called the andon cord above your station at the production line. And if you're working on a part and something goes wrong, you pull on this cord. And the whole production line stops. Managers descend from manager heaven or wherever managers come from. And they come to your station and they say, hey, what's the problem? Like, what's wrong with your station? And only then does new process get added to the production line. And the reason I like this is because it means that process forms from the bottom up in an organic fashion, and it's tailor-made to what that production line needs. Now, stepping that back up and getting a little bit more meta, I think that's important because your process will become your culture over time. And for Reddit, we want to be really agile, we want to be flexible, and I think that starting the company with this sort of bottoms-up organic process is going to take us to the future in a way that I want the engineering organization to grow. All right, so let's walk through what we did really quick. This is Reddit's JIRA evolution. We started with actually Marty and I put this together. We started with a 6-step instruction manual that we came up with: definition, planning, staffing, execution, launch, and monitor. Any work in the organization can be in one of those states. We worked with our IT department to try and get that into JIRA, and that's a screenshot of it there. This allowed us to get to team dashboards in JIRA. So you can see this is for our Reddit community experiences team. And you can see across that entire organization all the epics and what state they're in: backlog, planning, staffing, execution, monitoring. This wasn't really useful for daily stand-ups, but once we got in the team to commit to putting this stuff into JIRA, we were able to get everyone Kanban boards, which were great for stand-ups. Problem here is now we still need to report out. It's not enough to stop at the level of Kanban boards. We've got to report out to the rest of the team. Here's our first attempt, which was integrating our JIRA with Tableau. This is maybe a little bit too wonky, but what it does is it allows you to see a real-time dashboard of all the work happening across all the teams at Reddit in real time, along with like a little health monitoring metric that we came up with, and an automatically generated calendar. I was pretty proud of that when we put it together. But where we ended up with, and I think you'll like it, where we ended up with instead of this is executive dashboards. These are updated in real time, and people like them a lot more because we brought the cartoons back. That's where we're at now. Results of that, I think, speak for themselves. In 2017, these are all the major releases we had: new moderator mail, launch of profile pages, self-service ad platform, international Reddit, new video platform, new search platform, new chat platform, complete site redesign coming soon. All right. Wow, no one's happy about that? Thank you. All right. Okay, so that's what we did at Reddit. Now, I know that there's a lot of non-managers in the audience, so I want to kind of wrap up my talk with a couple quick tips for how you can take advantage of scale as an IC. So 3 quick career tips for scaling. First one, get comfortable being uncomfortable. As your organization grows and changes, you have to believe me that there is opportunity in change. Comfort is the enemy of progress. And this advice kind of applies more broadly as well. Like if you're in a rapidly changing organization, you will see more opportunities. But just in general, as a software engineer, one of the reasons that you will like working in this industry is because you get to continually learn. While I've given this talk, 3 new JavaScript frameworks have been released. But get comfortable getting out of your comfort zone. For me, that meant leaving Microsoft and joining a startup. It meant doing an MBA while I was working full-time. Find ways to push yourself. Second, follow the investment. So reorgs You may have a manager. Your manager is always going to tell you that the work you're doing is the most important thing in the organization. Trust me, all right? But nothing speaks louder than a reorg to tell you where your executives or your leadership team want to spend all their bullets, if you will. So follow the investments. If you can understand the reasoning behind a reorganization, then you understand the priorities of your leadership team. And if you can take advantage of that, you can put yourself in the most valuable positions in the company. And then finally, be a process pilot. If your organization is growing and scaling, it means that people like me, people like your managers are all trying to figure out the right process for your team, and it's actually very, very hard. Because you never know the right process up front. I told you guys explicitly, don't try and land on a team with this Agile framework book will solve all your problems. Don't do that. You, as an IC or as a manager in the organization, can help by piloting to find the right solution. The other thing that's important about this, as I said before, your process will become your culture. So if you want to have a great culture, try and participate in this. You'll help your manager and you'll help your future engineers. So that's some quick advice. Final thoughts on scaling fast at Reddit. 2 opportunities and 1 challenge I want to leave you guys with. And these are both maybe a little bit more personal to me. I think that at Reddit, because we're scaling so fast, we have an opportunity to do a great job of diversity and inclusion. There's going to be a huge track on this later, which I think will be interesting. But for me, this is important because I believe that diversity and inclusive teams build better products. But even more important, I just think they're more fun to work at, and that often gets overlooked. Being able to come into an organization and meet all sorts of different interests and types of people is something that I just enjoy, and I think your teams will as well. Like any cultural aspect, you want to get this fixed early as you scale because it's extremely difficult to fix later on. And I don't need to tell you guys about all the different stories about D&I problems in the Valley right now. But at Reddit, we believe as we grow, we can help solve this problem. Make it part of our DNA from day one. Right and wrong ways to do this. I think that rather than hiring a head of diversity, the best thing to do is get your entire executive team involved. So at Reddit, each one of our execs has KPIs associated with diversity and inclusion. We don't assume that everyone cares about this topic, but we try and find ways to allow them to participate through employee resource groups. We don't complain about the hiring pipeline. One of the fundamental things that I learned when I came to Silicon Valley from Seattle is the value of boot camps. I think my first week at Reddit, we invited a group called Hackbright to the company for mentoring. And I got to meet some of the hardest working, hardest hustling women who want to switch careers and get into technology that I've ever met in my life. And since then, we've taken many opportunities to hire bootcamp graduates into Reddit. And I can tell you for sure, they have become some of the strongest leaders in our organization. And this is something I wouldn't have expected, but I am now a strong believer. Don't complain about the pipeline, find ways to actively change it. And then the final thing, don't ever in your organization say diversity of thought. Like, I will find you. I will find you. Never say we don't see gender or color. Like, I will find you. When you say those kind of things, it kind of means, like, if you tell me you don't see color, it means you don't really see me. And that can be very, very hurtful. If you're a leader who's responsible for building an organization, be intentional and be patient and stay focused. You can move the needle. I think you have the tools and the opportunity now. And social impact, as your company gets bigger, just remember you can have more value to the world than the software that you shipped. Here, we've got us at Hackbright. We've got Team Reddit Extra Life. Play video games, raise money. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. And on the right, this is where one of our directors went to Uganda to actually to train some up-and-coming entrepreneurs there. Finally, a note to managers about scale. Long ago, when I was kind of a new manager, sorry, I'm getting stopped. Last story, I promise. Long ago, when I was a new manager, I was trying to, I was bold, and I was trying to understand what it meant to be perhaps a director someday, or even an executive. So one day, I went to the office of my senior vice president. His name is Kurt Delbene, And I camped outside of his office until he showed up. And I asked him when he showed up if I could come in and pick his brain. And after a long conversation, I asked him, like, hey, what do execs even do? Like, what do you do in your office all day? And he showed me, he took me over to his desk and he showed me an Excel spreadsheet. And he said, Nick, I changed the numbers in this Excel spreadsheet. I'm not kidding. He showed me that, and I was just baffled. I couldn't believe it. I thought he was joking. He said, I changed the team sizes here, and it changes this budget allocation here. That's pretty much what I do. But he told me, following that, the hardest part of his job as a leader, as an executive, was remembering that when he changed those numbers, it affected hundreds of people. So as your organization scales, you can sometimes find yourself in this very risky, very unsafe proposition where you forget about people and you start calling them resources. So if you're a manager in this room and you're responsible for growing an organization, please be careful. All right? Just remember that people are the most valuable part of any organization, and they're the reason that you became a manager in the first place. Okay, so with that, I have a few calls to action. Reddit is hiring. I have to get that pitch in. We also have an internship program if anyone's interested in that. Follow me on Reddit, Twitter, Medium, or LinkedIn. And my wife and I have started the Color Code Fund. We're raising money for future people of color in the tech industry. With that, you guys have been an amazing audience. Thank you so much.